The modern world has labeled Australia the land of nope, and for good reason. Everything here is either bigger, deadlier, or just plain weird. It is home to a highly disproportionate amount of lethal animals, with more venomous species than all but 2 other countries, and takes the cake when you only consider species that are fatal to humans. It hosts the top 11 deadliest snakes in the world, part of the 20 out of 25 most venomous found there. You've got the classic terrors, the saltwater crocodile, the great white shark, and jellyfish so potent they can stop your heart. This is a place where some of the largest insects in the world call home, where a pine cone can kill you, and where the top 3 largest wildfires of the 21st century have taken place. The list of things that want to end you in modern-day Australia is endless, but you get the idea. Now, try to stomach this. Modern Australia is actually much, much more tame than it used to be. We are not talking about the fact that this continent once hosted dinosaurs. We are talking about colossal monitor lizards and giant terrestrial crocodiles that roamed the earth in the not-so-distant past. You don't have to travel far back in time to arrive at this forsaken version of the continent. This chaotic period reached its absolute peak roughly 50,000 years ago, which is the exact moment humans first arrived. Talk about a hellish welcome. Back in those dark days, the apex predators were not the mammals you might expect, but gargantuan, terrifying reptiles. It wouldn't take long for anyone, or anything, to realize something was profoundly wrong once they set foot on the land. There was a host of nightmarish creatures wandering around, and the first monster you'd likely meet was a familiar face with an unbelievable twist. Imagine the silhouette of a crocodile, but it's running straight at you, and it's fast. This was the Quinkana, a literal land croc. This was not a crocodile lookalike or a strange hybrid. It was a genuine, real crocodilian that happened to run comfortably on land. During the Pleistocene, the Quinkana was one of Australia's top predators. It shared many features with the crocodiles we know of today, and was even once classified as a true crocodile. But thanks to a very odd skull structure, paleontologists were forced to move it to the extinct clade of Megalania. The bizarre skull was just the start. Researchers also noticed its legs were unusually long for a crocodilian. This specialized design allowed it to keep its enormous body clear of the terrain, and more terrifyingly, it granted it the ability to potentially sprint. This is why it is considered a purely terrestrial predator. Further evidence cementing this nightmare came from its hoof-like toes and its flat tail, which was clearly not designed for swimming. This was a pure, unadulterated land killer, and it was no small critter. Most adult specimens measured about 10 feet long and weighed 440 pounds, putting them nearly identical in weight to a medium-sized American alligator. Not to worry though, there were larger individuals. Researchers have found specimens reaching a monstrous 20 feet in length. At that sheer size, it had zero problem taking down any mammal, even an unlucky human from time to time. Getting cornered by this croc was an absolute nightmare. Its teeth were designed not to hold and crush, but to slice its victims up like a fillet. Each tooth was blade-like, heavily serrated, and compressed. These are known as zephyrodont teeth, and they are what was commonly seen in the mouths of theropod dinosaurs. Having such vicious dentition allowed the Quinkana to take down animals that were considerably larger than itself, with each bite tearing clean through large portions of flesh and muscle. And in the final layer of horror, reports claim you couldn't even outsmart this monster by jumping in the water. There is evidence that it was an accomplished swimmer, despite spending most of its life terrorizing the land. But even this dinosaur-toothed, land-sprinting, swimming croc wasn't the biggest threat. Surprisingly, it had to constantly look over its shoulder for something else walking the earth. The largest terrestrial lizard that was likely dripping with poison. Shockingly, or perhaps by this point, unshockingly, even a terrestrial croc was not the apex terror of its time. It had to live alongside the largest known terrestrial lizard to ever walk the planet, Megalania. There is a fair chance you have heard of this reptile due to its recent popularity, but you may not know that its original name is no longer strictly used. It is now known as Varanus priscus, meaning it was actually a giant species of monitor lizard. Despite this change in classification, the creature is still usually referred to by its terrifying original name, Megalania, which translates to the Great Roar. This is a fitting nod to its massive, unbelievable size, and massive it was. Paleontologists never seem to agree on the exact measurements, but all estimates put it at a minimum length of at least 3.5 meters, or 11 feet. Its minimum approximate weight, 158 kilograms, or 348 pounds. So, at the absolute smallest, we are talking about a lizard that was as long as a sea lion and as heavy as a reindeer. But at its maximum, things frankly got crazy. Studies have found that the Megalania could potentially obtain lengths of up to 7.9 meters, or 26 feet. This estimate is based on fragmented remains that were scaled up to living monitor lizards. This would have made them just as lengthy as the longest recorded anaconda, but due to its robust build, it would have been an astonishing 8.5 times heavier. The absolute maximum estimated weight for this monster was 2 tons. But this giant was more than just size. Like its living relatives, the Megalania possessed razor-sharp teeth that were fairly long and recurved, granting extra grip while holding on to prey. It is further thought to have used its tremendously powerful legs and sharp claws to bring down prey and foe alike. Naturally, in true Australian fashion, the Megalania might have been venomous as well. This belief stems from its heritage, as all monitor lizards presently living are considered to be venomous. Here is the truly shocking part. The venom of these lizards, similar to what is seen in some snakes, works as an anti-coagulant. This means it prevents blood from clotting, which keeps wounds open for longer periods of time and leads to deadly shock and infections. Since the Komodo dragon, also known as the Komodo monitor, is the Megalania's closest living relative, certain paleontologists believe that the two shared similar, gruesome hunting tactics, biting the prey, retreating, and then simply letting the poison do the work. So, even if you managed to get away from an attacking Megalania, you would still be absolutely doomed. All of these attributes feasibly made Megalania the single worst thing you could have run into in prehistoric Australia. Unless, that is, you suffered from opiophobia, a crippling fear of snakes. In that case, your mortal enemy back then would have been something named Wonambi. The name Wonambi may not sound like much, but it should strike absolute fear into anyone who hears it. It belongs to a now extinct giant serpent that lived right alongside both the Quinkana and the Megalania. This snake was unlike any we know of today because it belonged to a now extinct family of snakes known as the Madsoidae, or madsoid snakes. Members of this family were primarily characterized by two things: somewhat inflexible, primitive jaws, and giant sizes. The Wonambi was one of the biggest. It didn't quite reach the length of the longest living snakes of today, but it came awfully close, with a larger specimen having a length of 6 meters, or 20 feet. That's equivalent to a very large Burmese python. Luckily for us, the Wonambi did break the Australian trend by not possessing venom. Nevertheless, its sheer size still rendered it a potent killer. Reports suggest it might have hunted in a very similar fashion to modern constrictor snakes. That is to say, it would use ambushes near bodies of water to strike unsuspecting prey, which were then killed by tightening its muscles and squeezing the animal so hard that blood couldn't reach their brain or heart, thus incapacitating them. After the constriction, though, is where things got uniquely nightmarish. As mentioned, the Wonambi had an inflexible and somewhat smaller head. This meant it couldn't swallow large prey whole, like a python or anaconda. This may sound like a good thing for its prey, but in reality, it just made the snake even more horrific. To make up for this inability, the Wonambi would simply use its sharp teeth and incredibly powerful body to tear chunks off its prey. It was even known to disembowel them. Such an unpleasant way to go out may have been far more common for early Australians than being hunted by the Megalania or Quinkana. By now, it would be reasonable for you to wonder how any mammal could survive living with so many reptilian horrors. The simple answer is that the mammals that did survive were just as crazy. The answer to how mammals survived this reptilian hellscape is simple. They were just as shocking. This is best exemplified by the Thylacoleo, better known as the Marsupial Lion. This creature holds the terrifying distinction of being the largest known mammalian predator to ever live in Australia. On average, specimens were about the same size as a European wild boar, but the largest Thylacoleo were on par with fully matured female lions and tigers. Yet, this was absolutely no feline. It was a marsupial mammal that is most closely related to the koala. Reports claim that, like the koala, the Thylacoleo is thought to have had a smaller brain. However, in its case, a smaller brain was actually a massive advantage. It gave the skull more space for extremely dense muscles and wide, sturdy bones. This ultimately led to the most shocking fact about the Thylacoleo. It possessed the strongest bite, pound for pound, of any known mammal. It has been estimated that a medium-sized Thylacoleo was capable of biting with the same sheer force as a lion, 2.5 times its size. This immense power led paleontologists to suspect that this marsupial monster was capable of taking down massive-bodied prey that were up to 15 times heavier than itself. And it didn't just bite. It executed its kills with an extremely unique and gruesome efficiency, thanks to its bizarre dentition. Its teeth consisted of two main weapon systems. First, it had large incisors that were similar to the elongated canines seen in other mammalian predators. Secondly, it boasted giant premolars that were almost flat and resembled terrifying blades. Together with its powerful muscles, these bizarre teeth worked absolute wonders. Its unique killing mode involved piercing deep into the flesh with the incisors, while the powerful premolars acted as shears, intended to sever the poor animal's windpipe, spinal cord, and critical arteries. This mode of killing was so ruthlessly efficient that researchers think it took the marsupial lion less than a minute to kill large prey. By comparison, the same task can take an African lion up to 15 minutes or more. If, for whatever reason, that lethal bite didn't finish the job, the Thylacoleo had additional weapons. On each of its front feet, there was a single, large, retractable claw. This claw was attached to semi-opposable thumbs, implying the creature could move these weapons around with ease and dish out killing blows if needed. These additional hooked claws led to the idea that Thylacoleo was a skilled climber, possibly dragging its immense kills up into trees, much like leopards do today. This ability to climb further allowed it to navigate caves and rough terrain, adding another layer of complexity and danger to this already overpowered marsupial. And so, with reptilian terrors and marsupial butchers roaming free, Australia had some truly terrifying predators all around, making life extremely interesting for the first humans to arrive. But here's the next. They couldn't even find peace around the creatures that only ate plants. In response to these biological killing machines, the herbivores of prehistoric Australia also got pretty ferocious themselves. They had to. A terrifying demonstration of this is the diprotodon, an extinct marsupial whose closest living relative is the placid wombat. The two did look somewhat similar, except unlike the wombat, the diprotodon was absolutely massive. It plausibly weighed up to 3.85 tons. Think about that. This creature was equal in weight to a fully grown Asian elephant. This enormous size gave it much needed durability and would have made the task of hunting it an incredibly questionable, if not deadly, endeavor. This task was further discouraged by the presence of a surprisingly powerful bite. The diprotodon was strictly a vegetarian, but it nonetheless still possessed a nasty bite. At the back molars, its jaw reached a stunning 11,000 newtons in force. That gave it more than enough power to technically break a human's femur. In addition to elephant-sized wombats, birds too were supersized in prehistoric Australia. At the time, nothing was more terrifying than the Geniornis. This ancient bird resembled the once widespread terror birds found elsewhere, but it actually belonged to a separate family of flightless birds known as the Dromornithidae, or thunderbirds. All members of this family, Geniornis included, are believed to have been herbivores, despite their incredibly menacing appearances. Like many ancient Australian creatures, they did have size to help balance out their defenses. Geniornis, with the average individual coming in at 2 meters, or 6.5 feet. Moreover, this bird had giant, robust bones that gave it immense durability and heftiness, resulting in it weighing a full quarter of a ton. If its sheer size wasn't enough of a deterrent, the Geniornis could always use its powerful beak or sharp claws to ward off any predator that got too close. By now, it should be obvious that ancient Australia was the absolute last place you'd ever want to visit. The world was utterly saturated with danger. The fact that any mammal, let alone humans, could survive in a world teeming with land-sprinting crocs, 2-ton venomous lizards, Marsupial lions with the strongest bite on Earth and elephant-sized wombats. Seems like a miracle, but the sheer level of danger was even broader than just these giants. Just to really drive home the nightmare that was ancient Australia, remember that nearly every single dangerous animal that makes modern Australia the land of nope was still around back then. You still had the terrifying ancestors of the saltwater crocodile, the lethal spiders, and the potent jellyfish, all living alongside the megafauna. And that's not to mention the other extinct monsters that haven't even been covered yet. The landscape was littered with other, smaller horrors and additional giant reptiles that were just as deadly. This included massive, now extinct turtles and other crocodilians, such as the polak and the palomnarchus. The sheer volume of apex predators, both reptilian and mammalian, was unnervingly high. It suggests a constant, brutal battle for survival, where literally every creature had to be a walking weapon, just to avoid being someone else's next meal. This hyper-carnivorous environment demanded relentless evolution, pushing every creature to be faster, stronger, or more venomous than the last. Furthermore, it wasn't just the animals that wanted you dead. Nature itself was also harsh. The continent was already prone to extreme droughts, creating harsh and unpredictable conditions that would have concentrated the megafauna around scarce water sources. This means that every watering hole, every riverbank, and every oasis would have been a guaranteed kill zone, forcing humans and giant predators into frequent deadly encounters. In this horrifying environment, the idea of finding peace or safety was a complete fantasy. Every shadow, every rustle of leaves, every trip to the water, it was all a calculated risk that could end with you being sliced by a dinosaur-toothed croc, poisoned by a giant lizard, or disemboweled by a snake that couldn't swallow. With all of this intense, unrelenting danger, with elephant-sized wombats that could break your femur, and a marsupial lion capable of a 1-minute kill, it seems utterly unbelievable that early humans not only survived, but managed to establish themselves on the continent. But here's the final, shocking truth that redefines the entire story. Despite facing all these seemingly insurmountable odds, early humans didn't just endure the horrors of prehistoric Australia. They thrived and managed to dominate the lands. They didn't retreat to safe havens. They conquered. Evidence that has surfaced is truly revealing. It shows that the early human populations in Australia were actively preying upon multiple species of the megafauna mentioned today. They were hunting the giant diprotodons, the terrifying ginormous thunderbirds, and others. The very monsters that seemed capable of wiping out any human population were themselves being treated as prey. They hunted creatures with bite forces capable of crushing bone, with sizes that rivaled elephants, and with deadly poisons and claws. This suggests that the first Australians possessed a combination of intelligence, social organization, and hunting prowess that elevated them above the entire terrifying food chain. They developed strategies to overcome the Quinkana's speed, the Megalania's poison, and the Thylacoleo's raw power. This flips the whole narrative on its head. The focus is usually on how dangerous the animals were, but the ultimate enduring mystery is the lethal efficiency and resilience of the humans who faced them. They were not victims, they were the new apex predator. This begs the question, were the giant land crocs, the marsupial lions, and the thunderbirds the scariest animals around? Or was the most formidable, lethal predator of all the one that first arrived 50,000 years ago? The one that ultimately helped cause the extinction of the giants it hunted? Perhaps the real nightmare down under wasn't the monster you were running from, but the one you became to survive. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep looking over your shoulder.